All right. So like Elaine mentioned, I am Dave Gugerty, curator of the Bureau County Historical Society and the Henry Immke photograph collection. And so the Immke collection is one of our two main photography collections. We also have the Bill Lamb collection, which some of you may be familiar with Bill Lamb's work. And the Lamb collection is here over my shoulder. You can see that in this room anytime you come to visit the museum. And I have lots of other content online, on video, and here at the museum about the Lamb collection if you're interested. But tonight we're going to cover the Henry Immke collection, which came to our museum in the 1950s. So Henry Immke was a German immigrant to the United States at the age of 16, and he was his parents died, or his father died when he was in his 30s, and so Immke decided to immigrate at that point, and somehow or another made his way to working on a farm in Peru, Illinois in 1855. And so for 8 years he was a farmhand here in the Illinois Valley, and then in 1863 he decided to move to Chicago and study the profession of photography. So for 3 years, he was an apprentice and a partner in the Samuel Fassett studio, which was one of the largest and best equipped studios in the United States in the 1860s. Just as a brief matter of history, the earliest photographs were taken in the 1840s and 50s. They made daguerreotypes and other types of photographs, but widespread use of photography really caught on after the Civil War, and so Immke was in great time to move into that market, and he decided that since Princeton didn't have enough active photographers at the time, that he would come here after leaving Chicago in 1866. So he started his family here in Princeton, and he married another German girl in Chicago, and her name was Mary Steinbrook, and they had 4 children together, and their son Leroy died at the age of 11, and then they had 2 daughters and a son who lived on into the 20th century. So they do have several descendants in the family, and here through the museum I have met relatives and people throughout the country who trace Henry Immke as one of their ancestors. And so we do have quite a bit of personal collection from the family, as well as, of course, all of the things that he did commercially. So here on this slide, you can see the Immke family with all 4 children, and then the home that they had, which was on the north side of Princeton, and this is an interior shot of their house. So Immke started his photographic business after a brief stint with the Master Studio. He decided that he was going to set up shop on the north side near the depot. And of course, after the Civil War was when the north end of town really started building out and becoming the commercial hub that we know as the north end of Princeton today. Immke built one building that burned down after he was in it for just a couple of years. And then after being in a temporary location, he finished construction on this building. And in today's Princeton, where the studio is, on the corner of Main and LaSalle up on the north end, and then there's an empty parking lot to the north of the studio by Princeton, by the tire shop, and this is that parking lot today. And one interesting feature of the Immke Photographic Studio, or also known as Immke's Gallery of Art, this area right here, if you can see me pointing to it, is all glass. And he had this room was special built into the second floor of his building to let in natural light for the photographic process. You can see another view of the atrium here. So the extra windows here allowed light to come into this space, and this is the interior of the studio. And it's interesting, when the collection came to us from Immke Jr., we got a lot of the original furnishings. And so as we go through the portraits and some of these pictures behind the scenes here, you'll see some articles. There's a picture that you can see here, which is of the Princeton Fire Department, which is still hanging at City Hall. And then there's another photo here of our first mayor in town and some other things like that. So he did a lot of business with lots of local groups and, of course, all of the individual families that came in to get their portraits done. So real quick, we'll run through some of the antique photography techniques. So daguerreotype and ambrotype are both images from the early days of photography. And this is a daguerreotype image of Henry Immke as a very young man. And you'll often see these in the little locket cases, I'll call them. And they can have letters on the outside, and they're carved out of wood or different materials, and sometimes they're made of silver. And so what you're seeing, if I can hold this up just right, this piece of glass has a negative image printed on it, just like the one you see on my slideshow. And then with a piece of dark paper inserted behind it, it makes the negative image appear as a positive. And so that's an early glass print known as the daguerreotype. And then the ambrotype, ambrotype has the black material behind it. And then the daguerreotype is a positive image. And the thing about these are, this is actually the print that was made by the camera. So this is a one-off image as of a Polaroid, if you will. These are not reprinted onto paper like the glass negatives are. And then later on, they started doing the tin types, which is this. And you can hear this is actually a piece of copperized tin. And so like a piece of flashing off of your house. And again, the photographic emulsion is printed right onto the metal surface. And this is a one-off image that's then developed. And it's a positive image. And you can see the couple there. But that's, once again, there's no way to reprint this. Which brings us to the era of the glass plate negative. And the glass plate negative, of course, is what we work with here, and that's what was in the collection that Immke left to us. And so here is a glass plate negative, and you can see the negative image here, and this was effectively the film in the camera when the shot was made. So over my shoulder here is a standard box camera, and this piece of glass, once it was prepared with emulsion, would have been placed inside that camera, and the lens, then the photographic emulsion, when the lens prints onto that, makes a negative image. And then that negative image is used to print these, which are the cabinet cards, or carte de visite, if you speak French, which I don't. And gotta find out who's that image here. Okay, so the cards, cabinet cards as they are, these are on real heavy stock, and you can see that this one has pinked edges, so the edge is got a ruffle cut to it, and that's the styles of these cards changed over the decades, but that was the basic process of using the glass plate negative, like I just showed, to then develop a picture onto paper like we see here. And so you can see that this one is in very poor condition, and the photo print is separating from the cardstock. And so this was a matte piece of paper, and they glued the photographic paper down onto the cardstock, and then they would use sometimes albumin, and albumin was a mixture of egg whites that was actually the gloss on the photo. And so you can imagine that that wasn't a very permanent structure for this piece of paper. And so one of the benefits of having the original glass plate negatives is that we can reprint this photo today and have a better image from the original negative And of course, you could scan this and restore it that way, but because we're doing our scans off the original negatives, you get a much better resolution than trying to scan this paper. So that's a carte de visite, and that's what you make with a glass plate negative. And like I said, the bulk of what we do here, approximately 20,000 images that are available, are all on those glass plate negatives. There are a handful of daguerreotypes, ambrotypes, and tintypes that are mixed in that were just occasional things that Immke did. Some people preferred to have the tintypes made because they thought they were more durable, and for the money that folks were paying for this to go have their portraits made, that was a selection that a lot of people would make. So the collection itself, I mentioned it came to us from Henry Immke Jr. In 1956, the studio building that I showed you was to be destroyed, and our museum had opened in 1948. So Immke had come and I guess, offered to donate to the Historical Society the collection. And the original glass plates were all in wooden boxes, and they were brought into the museum on the corner by the courthouse and put into storage in the basement area. And so from 1956 until about 1989, so for 40-some years, or 30-some years, the collection just kind of languished, and nobody knew much beyond the fact that it was there and that there was a lot of information to be had. So beginning in the early 1990s, the Historical Society staff, long before my time, of course, undertook the project of categorizing and cataloging and cleaning and wrapping, and then ultimately creating a database, which I'll get to later in the presentation. So the most important part about all of this photography is the data. And so we can't do anything without the names and photo dates that are associated with all of this. So the names and photo dates were preserved in Immke's ledgers. And so here you can see this is just a standard day book, and throughout his entire career, Henry Immke wrote down every picture that he took, and he kept a running serial number. So this page that I opened happens to be September 28th, 1877, and you can tell the numbers just keep ticking up, and then line by line it shows the names and addresses of the people who came to get their portraits made. And one thing that's really interesting about this is the prices. I know you can't read this, but this person ordered 12 copies of their portrait, and it cost him $3. And in 1877, $3 was a lot of money. And so these were very precious art, items for people. And of course, getting their picture done maybe once in a lifetime for a wedding, or once in a lifetime once you had enough kids and you decided you wanted to bring them all in there. So that's one of the reasons the price of these items is why he kept the negatives, because he wanted people to come back later and buy more pictures when they had more money. And so that is a whole marketing strategy that led us to having all of this great history. In many cases, in many commercial settings, the glass plates would have been recycled after the paper prints were made. But it was not Henry Immke's practice to do so. And so on this card that I showed you earlier, it has what we call a back mark. And on the back, and he would print these himself, he would have plates made and then make these pressings on the cards as he was assembling everything else. And so on the back here it says, "Have on hand all negatives taken during the past 20 years. First-class photographs can be had from any of them at reduced rates." And so that was a big part of it, that he would send people on their way and say, hey, if your birthday comes along, or you want to send some more pictures out at Christmas time or whatever, then you could come back by and order more, and I'll make more. And we'll get into a little bit more of the photoshopping work that he did. And so here you can see the way we package and store things here at the museum. These are all acid-free boxes, of course. And then inside each of those is these negatives, which are in a sleeve. And so the staff back then, they created these envelopes basically that hold the negatives. So that's how everything is stored. And then they're all individually labeled and numbered so that we can find them in the boxes next door. And there are lots of different groups of work. You can see here I've got town scenes, residences, still lifes, trick photos and promotions, family and travel, and then one of his most famous works for us here at the museum is the Early Settlers Composite. So we'll run through and look at some pictures, and then after we get done with this slideshow, I will show you a little bit more about the scanning process and what we do here if you're interested in coming in to look for your ancestors in the portraits. So here's an example, just a brief kind of random group of portraits. These are pretty much atypical of what you would see and they change, the backgrounds change decade by decade depending on how he was having his studio set up, and he got more elaborate backdrops and things you can see. So on my left is the picture of the Mrs. J.H. Seton group in 1889, and you can see they have the elaborate painted backdrop behind them. And then in the other pictures from 15 years before that, you've got just a real simple kind of blank wall type backdrop. And that may have been in one of his earlier studio setups. One of the things that's interesting about the Mrs. Seton group, you'll notice in her hand, she has a photo of someone who has left us, and she wanted to bring their photo and have it be in this picture I would assume to complete the generations. So you've got 4, maybe 5 generations of Seton women here, and Mrs. Seton is holding a photo of someone from another generation to add to that. And then another thing you'll notice is the book on the table, and oftentimes the book on the table will be of significance to the people in the portrait, whether it's a Bible or a family book or some other thing. They would bring that stuff sometimes with them. And of course, there are also pictures of soldiers and other things that were done after the fact. So some Civil War soldiers had their pictures made post-war, and you can see that. And they would, so photography studios had stock uniforms that guys could come and dress up in if they wanted to represent their life in the service and things like that. So there's a wide array of portraits. And that is the bulk of the work. But then otherwise, if you don't happen to be related to anybody in the group, there's lots of other stuff that is in the collection that we can do. So this is just a quick example of a little digital restoration that we did. So that slide is not broken. The emulsion on the surface of the glass has shrunk up. And so I'm just with a real crude Photoshop technique am able to fix that kind of stuff. And there are people that are really good at Photoshop that can fix those perfectly. I don't offer that service here, but I just kind of use this as an example to show people that it can be done if you want to do the restoration on them or enhance them in other ways. It's definitely possible. And the frame that you see around the exterior of this slide is a tape, because we actually sandwich the broken emulsion in between another piece of new glass to keep everything intact in storage. And the damage on the emulsion is kind of batch by batch. Most of what we have is in really good condition, but for whatever reason, there'll be a run in a certain date range, whether it's, I think, 1907 or whatever for this particular example, and the emulsion just seems to fail based on whatever recipes he was using. There are a lot of scenes from around town. These are just some interesting pictures of the North End. Of course, he lived and worked there, so he would snap pictures occasionally. Near as we can figure, the bird's eye view is taken from the roof of Princeton High School. So that would be the west side of town looking east, or I'm sorry, east side of town looking west. And there's another view from up there as well that we have. And then the Stoner Block building is 1000 North Main Street, where the Tri-County building is today, and Johnson's Carpet and those. And then Larson's Furniture is here on the bottom. That's more widely known as the China Buffet building. And that is, you can see them laying cement there, and the vantage point in that picture is out the window of the Immke studio, also on North Main. So we see a lot of parade pictures from that vantage point as well, because he was able to just open the windows on the front of his shop and take pictures of what was happening around, and a lot of it's on the north end. And then there are these trick shots and photos. You know, there were selfies, of course, and pictures of cats and all the things that we have. The Honey family, who are here somewhere, they have another interesting back mark on the back of that one that advertises the address of the studio and has another spiel about how you can get your negatives. And so that's an example of something that he would have used as like a giveaway, because those are his cats, and it's got his name on the front of it, copyright 1892 by HW Immke. So that's one of his, you know, art pieces that he made to give away. And then on the left here, you can see him in the white hat and the black hat. He's taking his own picture, and he has a sign that says, "Look right here," next to the camera. So he's showing himself to look right here. And the picture on the right, I don't know, you might have your video over it, but it's a picture of Seth Bradley pushing himself in the wheelbarrow. And of course, Seth Bradley was a local implement dealer who was a neighbor of Immke's on the north end. And then there are also family and travel photos. On the right is Starved Rock, of course. Back in the day, everybody would travel to Starved Rock to hang out and camp, and you could take trains there and so forth and make a day trip of it. And then, of course, he had his Chicago roots from when he lived and trained up there, so they would go and visit. So we've got some of these travelogue scenes are interesting. There's pictures from Rock Island Arsenal and other places like that that he would go to and make different little travelogues like we all did. And then one of the interesting things he got, these are categorized as still lifes in Art Collection Index. That's how he wrote. It says still lifes in some of the ledger books, and of course he did some undertaking, and people have often heard that photos of the dead were not taboo in Victorian times, and that is in fact true in this collection. There are pictures of open caskets. There are pictures of very young people that are deceased, and pictures of posed bodies and things like that as well. Not a lot. He wasn't a specialist in that, but for a time he was in on the undertaking scene. So we see these still lifes, and oftentimes you'll see another photo worked in. They make them wear a negative of like an oval negative of somebody's portrait will be superimposed into a still life photo like this. And the tradition was you wanted to document all of the gifts of flowers and, you know, wreaths and things like that that people had made. So it was not uncommon for funeral pictures to be included in a family collection. Which brings us to the early settlers composite. And if you've ever visited our museum, you've seen this piece on the left. That frame is over 5 feet tall, and there are over 400 individuals pictured. And the Early Settlers Association was active up until right around 1900, but in order to be a member, you had to have lived in Bureau County prior to 1845. And so in the early 1870s, the Early Settlers Association decided that they were going to have this composite made. And so there are pictures on here that people brought in, and any person who had been a member of the Early Settlers Association, they had ads in the paper and wanted everybody to bring a photo to Immke's or go to Immke's. So, of course, a lot of these people from that generation had already passed on, which brings me to my bit about Immke photoshopping stuff here. So in the center, you see a color oil painting of Dr. Jason Swansea of Arispe. And right below that, you see a photo picture of that painting. And that picture is on the composite. So Swansea was gone, but his family wanted him to be included in the group. So they brought in this oil painting, and Immke took a photo of it and put it on there. So if you look closely, there are pencil drawings up there. There are pictures that are obviously very tiny from like little miniature lockets from those ambrotypes and things like that. And then, of course, this is a kind of a strange example. You can see where Immke actually removed the picture from the canvas from the frame so that he could photograph it. And then on the right there is a tintype picture, and you can actually see that's Seton, John Seton, the founder of Setonville, and he was long gone by 1870. But they did happen to have this family portrait, and you can actually see the tacks there holding it down to the board that Immke used to make that negative. And so one of the reasons that I bring that up, if you are searching with us later on and you find that your early settler ancestors appear in this collection outside of their lifespan, this is why. And so that's a complication that we run into occasionally, where people will say, well, this picture, all of these were done between 1870 and 1872. And so all of these early settler things, sometimes the dates won't match up. And then one of the, there's a version of this that's about half that size. This is the original. That's cut and pasted together. And there's one that's about half that size that's like 3 feet by 2 feet. And a lot of the early settler families may have a copy of that, which is a print in their collection. And then Immke also sent a copy of the full-size print to Library of Congress to register his own name and the name of the Early Settlers Association. So this piece is actually included in the Library of Congress and has been since the 1870s. So that you can learn more about that, and we used to sell posters of it, but they are out of print now, and we're actually in the process of maybe getting that scanned one day soon so that we can have portraits of it again. So that's a lot about the collection itself, and now I'm going to talk a little bit about how and what we do when you come here to look in and see what you can find for yourself. So, you know, monthly we get folks who come in and they want to search the collection to see who they're related to. And there's a process for that on our website. I think, yeah, that's my last slide. So I'm going to X out of this and take us to our website. So this is the Bureau County Historical Society.com website, which is a mouthful. And there are things here. You can contact BCHS, and if you do that, you'll get your form here where you can give me your name and your email and your phone number and a message, and that comes straight to my email, and I'll get right back to you. And then there's also information here about becoming a member of the Bureau County Historical Society, which you're all welcome to do. And if you click on the Collections tab, then you'll see a little paragraph here about the Bill Lamb collection, and below that, the Henry Immke photograph collection. So when you're here on the page with the Immke collection, there are two forms, and you can open the name search form. And this is the form that you can send me or just email the information to request a name search. And what this is going to do is send us to my database. And so this is a picture of the database that should have popped up. And I can do all of my searches and things here, and then I run queries, and it gives me my search results. And so these search results that you see here end up printing a report, thusly. And I can email you this report, and you will then have the last name, first name, description, which is like male, female, group, still life, you know, residence for the housing and different things like that, and then a location if there was one given. Usually these were delivered to the post offices after they were completed, so you'll at least have a person's town. So for the common names, those towns can be helpful. You know, if you're Johnson from Wynette, then you see that the stuff was being mailed to Dixon, then you don't have, you know, that might not be your family. And then, of course, the photo date. And the photo dates are also crucial for being able to match up people on your family tree and say, okay, if this is, you know, so-and-so, and they're supposed to be 18 years old in this picture and they look like a 6-year-old, then it might not be the same person. So those then, so I'll go back to the website, and so you can print this off and mail it to me, or like I said, you can just include the information in an email and send it that away. And we do charge $2 for the searches, and then you'll get your results back, and you can pay the $2, or sometimes we just defer that fee until the end when we're going to do the prints. So I'll go back then, and so now you've sent me your list of names, and Gugerty and Doran and Micklig and all the people that you're looking for in my family. And we go then to the reprint form, and you can take off of your search results and order up however you'd like to have your images sent to you. And so there's a place here where you can put your plate number and the subject names, and the most important things are the inventory numbers, which are on your search results. And you can then, we do provide digital copies now. So the scanning fee is $5, and then if and that's per slide. And so if you just want digital copies and you're going to print them yourselves, then it's $5 an image and $2 for the name search, and we're on our way. And then we have an archival ink printer here, so I can print pictures that won't fade on good paper, and we charge $15 to print them in 8x10, and then that can be delivered, or you can pick them up here at the museum if you're local. On the digital images, by email copy, you're going to get a restricted resolution. So if you're interested in a higher resolution on the digital copies, then we do a CD, and I can mail you a CD that has the full resolution, but with 600 or 1200 DPI TIFFs, you can't even get one of them in an email most of the time. So I have to send them as JPEG images that are compressed. But for whatever reason you'd like to have a higher resolution, we'll certainly do that through the mail. And so those are the two forms that are available, again, on the collections page of our website. And so that has all the information you need to know about how to order them from me if you're so interested. And then I'm going to exit out of this and take us to my scanner. Okay. What happened? New share. Zoom share. Okay. Oh, it closed me. Great. Okay. Okay. So here's my scanner. And I just wanted to kind of walk you through the process real quick. Let me back this slideshow up one time. This is an Epson V800 flatbed negative scanner. And the thing that makes this scanner different than the one on top of your printer is the fact that it has two lenses. So that's what allows me to be able to scan a negative image. And so you can see here there's a lens on top and a flatbed lens on the bottom. So basically this is going to run over the negative and shine light right through it, just like it was printing a photograph on an enlarger back when we used to develop film. And so this starts out, I'm going to put it on that very scanner that you see there. And then we're going to go here, and what we do, you can see my settings are for black and white negative film, and then it's in an 8-bit grayscale at 600 DPI. And we can go higher than that on resolution, but functionally 600 DPI for what you're looking at on your monitor and what you're able to print with your printer is plenty of resolution. The larger files, of course, are better for bigger prints, and we can get into that in terms of you need a certain number of DPI in your scan image to have a certain number of DPI in your print image. And there's a whole formula for that, and if print is your goal for these, then we can discuss what to do about better resolution. But since most people are using them digitally, this is as good as it needs to be without taking up an incredible amount of storage in the data sense. And so again, these Immke photos are not, the images are made to order, so they're not available on online or in storage here, except for the ones that have been ordered over the years. So I can check back if you have relatives that you know that have been in here doing this. I may have those scanned already, but for the most part, the Immke images are on demand. On the other hand, the Bill Lamb collection, we have been working on digitizing the entire thing so that all of those pictures are going to be available digitally once that is, however they decide that we're going to publish that. But the Lamb collection, you can get digital copies of those in here anytime as well. So I'm going to preview, and this is going to give me my scanned image to try out here. Okay, and so then that this picture has that frame around it with the tape, and you can see the damage in the emulsion in the bottom right-hand corner of our Seton Girls group here. So I'm going to select that area and make a little box around it so we don't end up with that. Now this is my file saved settings, and I'm going to choose how I want this to go into my memory. And the first thing we do is put the serial number in the save box. So this is G288. And that way we'll know wherever it lands what picture it is. And you'll notice this is going to scan now and take about 3 times longer than that preview scan took, because it's actually working it over in the DPI that we want at this stage. So it takes this, you can see 2 minutes. And so because this is a larger print, this is an 8x10 negative. I guess I'll tell you about that. The negatives come in all different sizes, and this one being an 8x10 is an 8x10 photo. So a lot of times what you saw in the smaller prints, this is a 4x5. And a 4x5 is pretty common. They also had 5x7s. And this, again, would be the same size as the piece of glass. He didn't do a lot in terms of enlargements. It was just as easy to shoot the original in the print size that you were going to do. And so we have them in storage in all different size categories, and that's just one of the parts of our formula for how we access things. So this is almost done now, and that file will pop up on my desktop. And so there's the picture that we just scanned, and you can see this is maximum resolution, and you can get quite a bit of imagery off of one of these pictures. This is, you can see her, the barrette that's holding her, you know, holding her lace there and all of that. So this is the kind of thing where you could go now and you could see the little spots of dirt and the little scratches, and somebody could really, really work this over in a digital sense and almost entirely fix it. And earlier in the program, I mentioned her relative here. And unfortunately, they're not in focus. Otherwise, we'd be able to identify who that is in her hand. So the resolution is there on the original images, as you can see. So you can compare, you know, the size of this. So if we're looking at the young lady here, this is her in the middle in the black shirt because of the negative. You can see how much resolution there is. You know, just to compare the size of those. So she's this big on the negative, but you could make an 8x10 print out of just her if you wanted to. So that kind of just goes to show what we do in terms of the process here. And I could normally turn an order around in a week. And if we're not busy, then I can do them on the spot depending on what the foot traffic in here is like. So if folks want to come in and spend an hour or two with me and go through the process that I just described, you're more than welcome. We can show you how things are scanned, or you can also preview. I can pull the negatives out of storage, and you can look them on our light box before they're scanned and decide which ones you may be interested in. Which brings me to another point. This logo, Immke Studio Princeton. If you guys have old family portrait collections, then you may have something like that in your collection. And so if you do, and you're really lucky, then on the back it has somebody's name written on it. But if you have portraits that say Immke and they don't have any names on them, then through a process of elimination by using the negatives here, we can identify those, maybe. So that's something that I've done for folks who say, okay, I Googled Immke and I came to you on the Google, and I have these portraits, but I don't know who they are. And I say, okay, can you give me a couple of ideas for family names in the 1800s? And they have those names. And I could say, okay, hopefully there's not too many of them, and I'll go and pull the whole family collection up here, and you can come bring your portraits and compare them. So that's something, and then you can have positive dates, positive identifications. And occasionally that will help you in other departments of your collection. Once you start to identify one or two people, then you can find them in other pictures and so forth. So that is the overarching thing that we do. I'm happy to answer the questions that I've been ignoring in chat this whole time. $2 search fee for each name, that's correct. So if you have a list of names, if it's Smith and Johnson, then it'd be $2 for each name. And then I'll email you those search results. How many plaques do we have? The general number is 20,000, and I have a little piece of paper here. There are 8,700 3x4s, 2,000 4x5s, approximately 4,000 5x8s, and another 1,000 6x8s, another 500 8x10s, and then a number of stereo views, which I didn't mention. And of course, this is something you might recognize as a stereo view. And this again is Immke branded. So this is taken with a binocular camera, just like my eyeballs here. And then you put it on the stereo viewer where you go like this and do the magic eye. And so Immke has these in the collection as well. And one really cool group is about 120 of Princeton's finest houses were all photographed in stereo. So if you happen to live in a fine house in Princeton on Park Avenue or Elm Place or one of those, there's a chance that your home will appear in the collection of residences. And another specialty collection that has a lot of stereos and then also a lot of large format in it is when the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad rebuilt their line through Bureau County in 1896. And so the tracks were 40 years old, and the railroad replaced the entire run and built new bridges over Bureau Creek, over the canal, all these different places. And likely because of the Darius Miller Princeton Depot connection, Henry Immke was given a contract from the Burlington line to document this track reconstruction. And so if you're into railroad equipment or construction techniques of the late 19th century, that is another amazing collection that shows all of the big bridges, the big wooden bridges that were replaced with today's big concrete bridges. Well, they were originally built at that time, 1896, and they raised the whole grade way up above the creek bed. So those are some of the other specialty collections, and I also mentioned the travel logs. Let me check on some more questions here. Immke's log books are not digitized; they are just photocopies. But I shouldn't say that. The information in the database is a direct copy of the log books. So the log books are just our photocopies that we have 2 copies of that were made back in the 90s. And then they took all that information and typed it into the database that I have online, or not online, but on this computer. Another question, have I tried to take a glass plate photo? Yes and no. I've seen it done. I have never done it. And we do have darkroom equipment here. So at something, if anybody has the chemistry skills and the things that would be necessary, that is an endeavor that we could undertake. I've at reenactments and different festivals, I've seen guys making tin types. That's a popular kind of historical, craft business that guys run. And so they'll bring out the old cameras and make the plates and prints and things right there on site. And they're usually pretty high dollar, but it's fun for like the reenactors to be able to get an old tin type photo that makes it look like in their costume that they were really taken back then. I can pull up the database again. Yes, this is, let me see here. I will go to share screen again and find my database. So this is the database, and you can search for photos, and we have all of our queries here. You can check on, look by size, by number, and then of course by first and last name. And then also by location. So if you wanted to search for everybody from Bureau Junction, we could search for everybody from Bureau Junction. And then these fields generate the search results. And then what happens with this, I didn't go all the way through this. I'll print your search results. And then this is the form that you get in the mail. So after I print your search results, this is the paper I was trying to show you that has the information, inventory, and so forth on it. So this will be what you get either by email or by mail. All righty. Does anybody else have any more questions? Well, hearing none, I will invite you all to come visit, or please feel free to drop in virtually as well. I can Zoom with you privately during my regular hours, or you can always call in. And I'd like to thank everybody that makes my job here at the Historical Society possible. We have lots of great members here in town, and some folks that I see on here that are our members and volunteers. So thanks to everybody who helps me out with the Historical Society, and to all of our great board members who many of you probably know as well. I'm here Wednesday through Saturday in the afternoons. It's easy enough to remember how to find me online at bureaucountyhistoricalsociety.com. And thank you all so much. And thanks to the Genealogy Society for allowing me to get on here and tell you a little bit more about what we do at the museum.